Hi, I am Toby Santamaria.
I'm Jalon.
I am Fortune Wesson.
My name is Shotaro Granzir Nakajima. I go by Sean.
So racially and ethnically, I am Mexican American, so I'm a second generation American.
Multiracial.
I'm Black, Chinese, and Indian.
I'm half Japanese, half Dutch, but I've grown up in America my whole life, so basically I would identify myself as American first.
I would say mostly it's just been really hard.
So my dad's Black and my mom is Bengali. So that's a country that's like east of India and south of Nepal. And so I kind of felt like I wasn't completely a part of my mom's culture because I don't know the language, and when we visited I was just kind of like lost. And then, with my dad it was totally fine. I feel like I'm more like passing as Black than I am passing of like Bengali. So I guess I like kind of relate to that culture more.
Since I am a pretty dark-skinned guy, how people will let that erase other like facets of my identity and will only see me like as Black, and there's nothing wrong with being only seen as Black, but still will just erase like my Asian heritage that like I grew up with and that like I'm very happy about and very proud of. And then also sort of going into Asian spaces and having to constantly like prove that I'm Asian enough.
One of the most basic manifestations would just be in terms of having an accent. Growing up I didn't really know exactly, or I couldn't identify that my parents had an accent because I grew up with them, so I'm so used to it. But yeah, maybe around like middle school I can identify, especially in my Japanese mom, a heavy accent.
Being kind of light enough to pass, but then just being not quite right. It opens you up to a lot of weirdly backhanded racism that's like, I thought you were this, but then you surprised me, which is still ridiculously racist. But I have just gotten like outright comments about how I am just a dumb Mexican or I am just XYZ because I'm Mexican.
Yes.
Oh hell yeah. Yeah, I've been called like every slur you can get called for a Black person, and then I've been called chink a few times. That's pretty shitty.
There's very few instances where I feel like I've experienced maybe an explicit sort of racism.
It's a construct, but just because it's a construct doesn't mean it like can't have an impact.
Ethnicity is more of a cultural perspective, so you could be ethnically some other culture than what your race is.
I think a lot of like American people would do well to figure out the difference between race and ethnicity.
That term can have a very like gnarly effect, especially like my friends who are like Black and white and like are women, because it's like this like fetishization with mixed people.
I would be more taken aback if people use the term mixed as opposed to multiracial.
I don't really like the term because the way we use it is always about like, so you have to be mixed with a white person because you're really pretty. Hispanic implies that the shared language that the Spanish forced on us implies that we all share the same kind of like cultural connection, right? Or it implies that we're all descended from a Spanish person, which isn't true.
Especially like a lot of my friends here in the Chicano movement hate the word Hispanic because it was sort of if I do recall, I can't remember like which president or official, what they pretty much use that as a way to erase like all of these South American identities and all these different indigenous and Mexican identities.
I think the reason some people take umbrage to the term African American is because some people don't have any connection to their African diaspora, and so they feel more comfortable calling themselves Black. I think which term you use is up to like your own personal connections to your identity of the diaspora.
I think someone, but just like in America, is just African American and has to go through like the struggles of having like different hair, the like Black Lives Matter movement.
I don't consider myself like African American. I consider myself like Black American because I feel like I don't know. Like I don't know my African culture. That shit was taken away from me.
When you say Asian American, like, what do people think of? They think of East Asians. Not everyone who's Asian is East Asian. And there's actually a lot of racial tensions that happen between East Asians and South Asians and, you know, Indian Asians.
People who are Asian American are more specific than that because typically they know. So, I mean, for example, me, I'm Japanese American, but in terms of, I guess, racial relations, no one cares about the distinction.
Something that used to happen to me a lot at Kenyon is like I would talk to all my white friends with my white girl voice and be like, hey, oh my god, how are you today? That's so great. And then I would see Anthony and be like, what's up, ese? ¿Cómo estás? You know? And when it would happen in front of white people, they'd kind of like do a double take and be like, why does she suddenly have an accent? Why is this suddenly happening?
Like Black culture tends to be, you know, a lot of Black slang tends to be associated with like lower intelligence. It's like, I'll wipe that out of my vocabulary entirely when I'm in a job interview. And I think to some extent, even when I'm on campus.
White is the pan-racial term that white Americans use because most of them no longer have like solid connections to their ethnicity.
It's almost like the exact opposite of like the term Black, where it's like you have Black being like this invention of a culture, while like white's sort of like the losing of a culture.
I would say someone who's of mixed race but passes as white because of the color of their skin.
I think it's really interesting to talk about being white passing with white people because they get really uncomfortable at the racialized language. But it's something that Latino Americans specifically have to think about all the time because all of our media, like if you turn on Univision, everyone is white passing. There's like a Black person.
I'd like to think that you know I'm just as white as I am Asian, but that's not up to me to decide. It's up to other people to decide.
Be able to do things that other people of color might not be able to without being looked at differently.
A lot of people will be like, well, like I'm white and I've struggled. It's like, we're not saying that you haven't struggled. We're just saying that how you've been treated in the world is significantly different than how, you know, a lot of other groups of people are treated.